Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the candlelit great halls and humble cottages of medieval Europe, where weddings did not rely on white gowns or bridal showers, but on feudal custom and family alliances. Forget romantic comedies and modern vows. The real story is about arranged matches, dowries exchanged under watchful eyes, and vows whispered in Latin. So tonight we ask what it truly meant to tie the knot when marriage served duty as much as desire. What did it feel like to pledge your life before a grim-faced priest in a drafty stone church, knowing centuries of tradition bound you forever? Every realm had its own customs, so let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who joins this journey along candlelit aisles and laced bodices. Now dim the lights, pull your blanket close, and let's step into medieval vows together. You awake before dawn, the household still quiet, and slip into the great hall where your father meets with the matchmaker. In medieval times, such meetings begin long before any formal wedding ceremony. As a young adult raised to serve your family's interests, you understand that love is secondary to alliances forged between families. Your parents seek to secure lands, wealth, and influence through your marriage. The matchmaker arrives with a heavy pouch of references, letters from neighboring lords, reports of dowries and estates, and word of family reputations. The matchmaker speaks with your father in low tones, recounting the virtues of a suitable partner in a nearby county. You stand at the edge of the hall, watching as your father nods. Soon your mother will bring forward a token to present to the family of your prospective spouse, a small chest of minted coins, perhaps embroidered cloth, or a prized hen hench. These tokens represent the family's goodwill and serve as a formal declaration of intent. The customs vary from region to region, but typically the first gift arrives through a messenger who travels the narrow roads under watchful eyes. You recall last spring when you accompanied your father to deliver a silver goblet to the lord of the neighboring manor. That gift signaled a desire for marriage between your elder brother and the lord's niece. Today you witness your parents discussing your own future. They weigh the advantages of alliances deep in the duchy or further north near the bishopric. Your heart flutters, for you have seen the prospect. A young woman of gentle breeding, learned in needlework and Latin prayers, with estates that yield rich harvests of grain. The thought that you might one day kneel before a priest to exchange vows in her father's stone chapel both thrills and unsettles you. You move closer when the matchmaker mentions the need for a formal visit. By mid-morning, a messenger arrives at your door bearing an invitation. It is a sealed parchment, sealed with wax bearing your father's crest, requesting a visit to the prospective bride's family. You dress in your simplest tunic trimmed with a hint of velvet, mindful of showing respect while maintaining dignity. You leave the manor on horseback with two of your father's trusted knights escorting you. As the horses' hooves clatter along the muddy road, you go over what you will say. Manners and courtesy matter, for every word you speak reflects upon your family's honor. When you approach the manor gates, the lady of the household steps forward to greet you. Her face is veiled by a thin wimple, her eyes bright with curiosity. You dismount and bow, offering a salute to her and the lord who watches from the doorway. You give gifts as tokens of respect, a gilded chalice and a cask of fine ale brewed from the family's barley fields. The lady accepts each gift with a graceful nod. She escorts you into the great hall where servants offer you spiced ale and fresh bread. You notice servants whispering as you cross the flagstones. Every step forward confirms your status and character. Over the midday meal, you converse with the lady's family and servants. You ask questions about their stewards, the yield of fields, and the local mill's output. You speak of your own family's fortunes, acres of grazing land, an orchard with apples sweet enough to send to the abbot's table, and a small herd of sheep prized for their wool. The lady smiles politely and says that her daughter has skill in weaving tapestries and can manage spinning staff. Each compliment you offer must strike a careful balance. praise enough to flatter without suggesting desperation. After the meal, the lady leads you through courtyard gardens toward the east tower where her daughter awaits. You follow a narrow path flanked by hedges heavy with honeysuckle. As you step into the cool stone chamber, you see her seated by a low table reading from a book of hours. Her hands move with delicate precision over embroidered cloth. You kneel and greet her. She rises gracefully and curtsies deeply. You feel the weight of centuries of custom in that small gesture, a silent promise that promises will be spoken in hushed tones beneath altar candles. The daughter speaks softly, revealing an education beyond what you expected. You exchange pleasantries about the changing seasons and the sowing of seeds. You speak of the new harvest expected in autumn and the need for careful planning during winter's frost. She listens attentively, offering her own observations about household management and the need for grain storage. You sense a mutual respect. Once the visit concludes, you linger in the courtyard to speak with your escorts. The knights remark how composed you were and how well you balanced courtesy with authority. You know they speak truth, for your father expects you to carry your family's honor through every interaction. When your horse's reins rest in your hand and you ride away, you glance back at the manor towers rising against the sky. You hope that this is not the only meeting, that more visits will come, and that your future bride and you might learn to trust one another before vows are spoken. Back at your own manor, you report to your father. You recount the meeting in measured terms, the lady's hospitality, the daughter's learning, and the estates being offered. Your father nods and contemplates the aligned interests. If all goes well, negotiations will continue. Over the coming days, gifts will flow between families, parchment scrolls sealed with wax and tied with ribbons, indicating dowry amounts and conditions. Matchmakers will haggle over the size of the dowry, the terms of inheritance in case of early death, and the fate of any children born from this union. Meanwhile, you spend time in your family's chapel praying for wisdom. You light a candle before the statue of Saint Valentine as a plea for guidance in matters of both heart and honor. In medieval times, such saints performed dual roles, offering spiritual comfort and social legitimacy. By early evening, you return to the great hall, where servants have prepared a modest feast to honor the matchmakers and mediators who facilitated the meeting. Over pewter plates, you share salted pork and black bread, raising tankards of ale in a quiet toast to future alliances. Later, as night falls, you retreat to your bedchamber and reflect on the day's events. You think of the daughter's gentle smile, her skill with needle and prayer. You recall the hush in her voice, the faint scent of lavender in her hair. You wonder how life might change if she becomes your wife. Yet you also understand that love must find a place within contracts and alliances. Your duty to family and land eclipses any fleeting desires. While some may profess that love alone can bind souls, you know that in medieval times marriage serves a larger purpose. By tomorrow you will learn if your family's negotiations have succeeded, and if the future holds a union that honors both lineage and the fragile promise of affection. In this world of ancestral customs and formal visits, you learn that marriage is a pact between houses, sealed with gifts and blessings. From those whose labor sustains both hearth and home, each handshake and each exchanged glance carries centuries of tradition. You would not trade it for anything, though you also hope that within these rituals you may find a partner who sees value in both duty and heart. Tonight you rest beneath the flicker of candlelight, knowing that your own story has only just begun. You return home late that evening and sleep fitfully, dreaming of what comes next. In medieval times, the second stage of courtship follows the initial visit. Now your family must formally request betrothal terms. The next morning, a herald appears in your courtyard riding a small but swift horse. He bears a message sealed with the Lord's crest. Your father breaks the seal and reads aloud. The Lord agrees to discuss a betrothal, and suggests that a formal gift exchange occur at the upcoming feast day of Saint Martin. This public setting will confirm intentions before both communities. You prepare your finest offerings. You select a bolt of cloth embroidered with your family crest and a pouch of coins minted from silver mined in nearby hills. The cloth will drape the prospective bride's bedchamber when she marries. The coins will pay for furnishings and minor expenses at the wedding feast. You wrap these items in white linen and pray to the household patron saint for safe delivery. On the feast morning, you dress in your best tunic, a simple woolen garment trimmed with a strip of velvet at the collar. You fasten a small pouch of dried fruits to your belt. Outside the manor gates, your escorts gather, 2 young squires and a trusted steward. They carry your gifts on a wooden tray. You mount your horse and lead the small procession toward the neighboring estate. Along the road, villagers stop plowing and wave as your party passes. Word travels fast in medieval countryside. Upon arrival, you dismount at the gate and bow to the lord and lady who await. They usher you into the great hall where long tables stand laden with roast fowl and fresh bread. Servants bring platters of salted fish and mugs of new ale. You seat yourself beside the gentleman's daughter, who blushes as you place the cloth and coins before her. Her father nods and accepts the items on her behalf. You make a formal speech. With this cloth and these coins, I honor your daughter and pledge my family's promise. Your voice echoes off stone walls and chamber candles flicker in the cool morning light. The lady's father replies politely. He praises your generosity and instructs his steward to show you the prospective dowry. You follow through winding corridors lined with tapestries, arriving at a small chest bound with iron. Inside lie parcels of gold coins, a fine gown of deep crimson woven with silk, and a small herd of goats intended to provide fresh milk. This dowry ensures that the bride will not be a burden on her husband's household. The father explains each item and its value. You nod, impressed by the careful planning. After touring the dowry, you and the lady's father return to the great hall. The assembled guests applaud your acceptance, and trumpets sound from the battlements outside. Children chase one another beneath benches, weaving between shadows. You bow to both father and daughter and speak a vow. I accept this dowry in faith and pledge to love and protect your daughter all my days. The father responds, I receive your vow and entrust my daughter's welfare to your care. With that, the betrothal becomes official. A priest approaches with a small book of psalms. He places both your hands in the lady's and recites a few verses in Latin. You do not fully understand every word, but you sense their solemnity. You press your palms firmly to hers and promise to stand by her through good and ill. The priest sprinkles holy water on both hand and cloth, asking divine blessing on this union. You feel a shiver of awe at this sacred ceremony. After the rite concludes, festivity resumes. Bread and cheese pass around the table. You share cups of sweet mead with neighbors who congratulate you. Laughter and music fill the hall. A minstrel strums a lute and sings a ballad of noble knights who found true love despite many trials. As the minstrel's final notes fade, you catch the lady's eye. She smiles shyly and offers you a slice of spiced cake. You taste the sweetness and feel joy warming your chest. Toward late afternoon, you prepare to depart. The lady's father hands you a scroll containing the formal betrothal contract. It names the bride and groom, lists dowry items, and specifies that the marriage will occur at Michaelmas next year. Conditions appear in fine Gothic script. If you die before the wedding, half your dowry returns to your family. If the bride dies first, you must pay a small stipend to her heirs. Each clause has been negotiated carefully. You read the scroll aloud in a clear voice so everyone hears each stipulation. When you finish, the lady's father hands the scroll to the local scribe to record the union in the parish register. Late that afternoon, you ride back home with your attendants. Along the road, you note your father's face proud and his eyes bright with relief. He speaks of how this alliance will strengthen trade routes and bring your households closer. You think of how your own life now shifts from bachelor's freedom to a future as a married lord. You recall the meal, the ceremony, and the way the lady's eyes glowed as she placed the cloth in your care. In that moment, you sense your path destined. Back at your manor gate, you dismount. Villagers greet you and bow as you pass. You carry the lady's father's gift, a cask of prime wine with a carved stopper bearing his family emblem. You present it to your mother, who plans to serve it at tonight's supper. Your younger brother looks to you for guidance. You pat his shoulder and say, "Take care of our fields. Soon I shall call on you to tend the wedding orchards." That evening you dine in the great hall lit by sturdy candles. Your mother distributes slices of sweet fruit cake and pours the gifted wine into goblets of pewter. Servants bring salt-preserved pike from the river and fresh turnips roasted in earthenware. You raise your cup and give thanks for a successful betrothal. You feel a strong sense of purpose to uphold your promise, cherish your bride, and strengthen family bonds. Late into the night, you retire to your chamber. You unroll the betrothal scroll and read the fine Latin script by flickering lamplight. You imagine the wedding day, when vows will be spoken solemnly before altar and community. You think of the first time you saw her weaving by candlelight and how her gentle voice soothed your heart. You wonder if love will blossom between you or remain distant custom. Still, you trust that time will bring understanding and warmth. As midnight deepens, you blow out the lamp and rest on furs beneath a humble roof. You reflect on the morning's events, gifts exchanged, vows recited, contracts sealed. You know that the path ahead demands courage and strength, yet you also sense a spark of hope that, within this union of duty and faith, you might find companionship and joy. Tomorrow you will greet your bride with a new sense of responsibility. In the heart of medieval life, marriage served lineage and duty first. But in that blend of custom and affection, you plant the seed of something greater. With dawn near, you drift into sleep anticipating the seasons that will shape your future as husband and lord. You awake at first light and find your father in the solar, studying a sheaf of parchments. He gestures for you to approach. Today you will negotiate the betrothal contract and dowry for your bride. In medieval custom, the contract binds two families long before any sacred vows. It defines property transfers, obligations, and penalties should the match fail. You stand before quills and inkpots as your father explains that you must secure the best terms possible. First, you review the lists of assets. Your family will provide a dowry of 3 carts of grain, a chest of coins, and a small parcel of land near the river. In return, the bride's family offers a herd of goats and a small vineyard outside the town walls. The scribe sits at a low table, ready to record details in Latin. You feel the weight of responsibility. Every word he sets to parchment will shape futures for generations. Your lordship demands certain additions. You ask for an annual payment of a pair of fat geese from her father's poultry house. You explain that this payment ensures her maintenance should you fall in battle. The bride's father listens, but appears hesitant. He offers instead a suit of fine cloth for your younger brother as compensation. You hesitate. You know a simple suit will not fetch as much as 2 geese each year. You counter with an offer to reduce your parcel of land by half an acre if he agrees to the geese clause. He nods thoughtfully and signals his steward to fetch a sheaf of papers detailing the poultry yields. While the steward hurries off, you turn to other terms. Dowry clauses often include reversion in case of widowhood. You insist that if your bride outlives you, she retains her dowry lands and a small cottage near the mill. The steward returns with figures showing that a widow's maintenance could strain the family coffers if too generous. The bride's father proposes instead that she receive only half the lands and join her brother's household. You press him. Your bride must not be left destitute. You offer to live off the estate incomes for an additional 2 years to allow her to sell, produce, and support herself. He nods and agrees. Now the scribe unfurls a fresh sheet. He dips his quill and scratches lines of Latin across the vellum. You read each clause aloud in Old English, so that both sides understand. Terms include the date of marriage, the exact measures of grain to transfer at the wedding, and the schedule of payments for the geese. The contract specifies that each goose shall weigh at least 10 pounds dressed. It also states that if either family fails to deliver the promised goods, a penalty of 2 silver pennies per breach shall apply. You trust that these pennies will encourage timely delivery. Your mother stands nearby with the bride's mother, exchanging curt smiles. They discuss maiden's customs as the scribe writes. You sense that while you negotiate finance and property, they negotiate household items, linens embroidered with family symbols, candlesticks fashioned in the shape of griffins, and lace edged with silk. You nod as they mention these finer points, knowing that such items matter as much to daily life as plots of farmland. The scribe finishes the first draft. He smooths the parchment and hands it to you. You read carefully, confirming that every asset and penalty appears correctly. You notice a line stating that if your bride's dowry goods do not arrive within 3 days after the marriage, your father may reclaim half the dowry in coin. You frown. 3 days leaves little time for carts to travel across rainy roads. You speak up, requesting an extension to 1 week. The bride's father concedes and the scribe amends the clause. Next, you discuss witnesses. In medieval custom, at least 2 men of good reputation must stand witness to the contract. Your father presents Sir Rolf, a knight known for his loyalty, and Master Will, the steward of the manor. The bride's father names his cousin, Lord Conrad, and a prominent merchant who trades wool in the market square. Each witness steps forward as the scribe sips from an inkpot and carves their names in a tight hand. The date of exchange stands on All Saints' Day, when villagers gather for Mass. At the Prior's church, the contract will be read aloud after Vespers. Both families give the scribe a silver penny each as payment. You hand over your coin and feel its cool weight in your palm. The scribe tucks these pennies into a leather pouch to cover his ink and parchment costs. As late afternoon approaches, you walk with the bride's father into the courtyard. He places his hand on your shoulder and smiles. He invites you to share a cup of spiced mead. As you drink, he compliments your firmness in negotiation and your willingness to ensure his daughter's welfare. You nod in respect and reply that securing her future honors both families. The two of you clasp leather gloves in a sign of trust. Before departing, you both agree that the bride will visit your estate during harvest. She will inspect the granaries and see firsthand how you manage the lands. In exchange, you will provide a dowry demonstration at her estate by baking bread using her family's grain. This visit helps both families gauge compatibility beyond numbers on parchment. It also honors the custom of peering into each home's daily life before vows bind 2 souls together. You return to your manor just as candle flame spills from the keep window. Your bride's father's gifter small satchel of rare spices rests on the hearth. You plan to present his daughter's dowry chest during the feast on All Saints' Day. That chest will stand before the priest as you recite the contract in Latin. Until then, you place the gift in a locked chest. At supper, your mother calls all siblings to the table. You recount details of the negotiation. Your younger brother's eyes widen when he hears of the vineyard. Your sister listens to the clause about the widow's cottage and promises to embroider bed linens accordingly. The household begins to bustle with preparations for the feast day. You nod and feel a mix of relief and anticipation. Tomorrow you will inspect the dowry goods once more and attend to final touches, polishing goblets, sealing additional provisions in wax, and readying your best surcoat for the church ceremony. Late that night you pace the moonlit courtyard and reflect on the day's gains. You have secured the geese from the poultry house, guaranteed your bride's future comfort, and won the trust of her family. The contract covers all assets and penalties. Witnesses stand ready to confirm it. Your bride will soon seal the promise in a church, lit by flickering candles and bedecked with garlands of ivy. Then two families become one. As you step beneath an ancient oak, you think of the binding nature of medieval marriage. It is not merely the joining of two hearts, but the intertwining of lands, goods, and fortunes. You marvel at how a single contract can shape entire communities. You feel the weight of tradition on your shoulders. Yet you also sense the possibility of a future where your bride and you build a home together. Tomorrow, the scribe will finalize the contract, and your bride will stand at the manor gates bearing her own gifts. For now, you rest on a bench, breathing in cool night air. The parchment waits on the table inside. Dawn will bring more negotiations of hearts and property, weaving your destiny with hers before any sacred vow is spoken. You rise at first light and find your father already in the solar, pondering the scrolls from yesterday's negotiations. He hands you a small wax tablet inscribed with notes from the bride's family. Today you must examine the lands they offer as part of the dowry. After washing and dressing in your simplest tunic, you mount your horse and ride across fields where dew still clings to ripe grain. Two of your father's men accompany you, leading a pack horse laden with provisions for the journey. You travel along well-worn roads, flanked by hedgerows heavy with blackberries. Soon you reach the bride's family manor. Smoke columns rise from slate chimneys against a pale sky. The gates open to admit you into a bustling courtyard. Peasant children scurry about, carrying baskets of eggs and jars of honey. You notice the vineyards in the distance, their neat rows stretching toward the eastern woods. The squire greets you at the gate and nods respectfully as you dismount. In the great hall, your prospective father-in-law awaits with stewards at his side. He gestures for you to follow him out, back where the dowry lands lie. You set off across a meadow fed by a narrow stream. You hear cattle lowing as you catch sight of a small herd grazing. The father-in-law explains these cows will transfer once marriage occurs. You nod and inquire about their productivity. He replies that each cow yields a large pail of milk every morning if the summer rain spreads green grass across the hills. Moving on, you cross a simple wooden bridge into a small woodland where white chat blooms at the base of oaks. Under these trees, a section of woodland stands reserved for your bride. It lies on a gentle slope where pannage allows pigs to root for acorns each autumn. You observe how the trees stand straight and strong. You ask about ownership rights. He clarifies that until marriage, you and your bride may not cut timber there, but may gather nuts and berries. After marriage, the rights will transfer fully to your household. You sense this clause ensures a livelihood for her years to come should misfortune strike your line. Next, you inspect a small parcel of arable land near the river. You cross thick grass where farmers once laid seed and find earth freshly tilled. Furrows run deep from oxen ploughs. A steward indicates where flax rows will appear next spring. You run your hand through loose soil and taste a hint of loam. You ask about flood risk. He explains that only once in living memory did high water wash away seedlings. A low stone ridge above the river helps protect crops today. You nod, satisfied that this risk remains minimal. At midday, you walk along a narrow track to a modest manor chapel where your bride once trained as a singer. You peek inside to see wooden pews and a small choir bench. A priest emerges and greets you. He recounts how your bride spent seasons learning canticles and prayers. You recall that her father arranged for her to train here so she might someday join a noble household's chapel choir. You express admiration for her skill. He smiles, saying her voice remains clear as chimes. After midday meal of fresh bread and cheese in the manor hall, you return to the negotiation chamber. The father-in-law brings forward parchments outlining his expectations. In addition to land and livestock, he expects a small allowance of silk cloth to drape his own daughter's new bedchamber. You remind him of your promise to bring a bolt of green silk woven by the abbey's nuns. He nods approvingly and notes the promise on half of the parchment. You then suggest that your own family supply a set of pewter tableware so that daily meals may occur without worry of broken clay jugs. He consents and asks that the tableware bear both family crests. When the scribe adjusts the parchment, you witness your combined arms emblazoned side by side. Now you move to discuss financial penalties. You propose that if either family fails to deliver promised goods on the wedding day, then they must pay a fine of 10 silver pennies. The father-in-law counters that this sum seems small given the value of a vineyard and dairy stock. He demands 15 pennies. You pause and consider. When you ask that the penalty reduces to 5 pennies for each day of delay, he agrees, rather than refuse your compromise. The scribe notes this new clause. Late in the afternoon, you direct attention to the service obligations. In medieval custom, a bride's family often pledges service to her husband's household. You accept that your bride will assist for 3 days each year in the manor's great hall kitchen. In turn, you pledge that your own steward will oversee her father's crops for 1 harvest season. Both sides agree this exchange fosters mutual reliance rather than merely transferring goods. You see how careful balance of service and property cements the union in lived experience. As dusk nears, the father-in-law produces a final parchment. It details items of personal property his daughter will retain should she become widow. He offers a silver chalice and a set of prayer beads as symbols of her independence. In turn, you offer to provide her with a suitable allowance for daily needs until she remarries or passes away. The father-in-law accepts this promise. You feel a sense of relief that even in the event of misfortune, your bride's comfort remains a priority. Now all terms stand set. The scribe reads aloud each clause in Latin while you and the father-in-law nod in confirmation. The dowry measures defined include 3 cows, 1 goat herd, 10 baskets of apples, and a parcel by the river. In return, your dowry requires a dozen geese that breed well through each cycle of seasons. Both families agree to transport goods to the marriage site on All Saints' Day. Your father-in-law extends his hand to you. You clasp firmly and bow to seal the pact. He smiles and calls for a flagon of ale served with spiced apples. You raise a cup and drink deeply. The celebratory mood returns as stewards and servants applaud. Children race around the courtyard chasing a puppy. Watchful eyes turn toward the upturned faces. When you ride home beneath moonlight, your thoughts focus on the careful give and take of negotiation. You realize that medieval marriage contracts demand precise detail and far-reaching faith in one another's word. Each clause binds family lands and futures. Today you have walked a tightrope between generosity and prudence. Arriving home, you find your own steward awaiting you by the gate. He presents a small ledger with notes on today's progress. You praise his diligence before heading to your father's solar. Together you review the final contract. Your father nods approvingly, remarking that the terms strengthen alliances and secure your bride's welfare. He ponders now the responsibilities ahead, preparing a feast to announce the betrothal and sending invitations throughout the county. In your binding contract, you see a map of future's children born under God's watch, shared harvests, struggles through winter famine, joys in summer festivals. You think of your bride drawing water from the well at dawn, of the hush of chapel candles, and of your own vow to defend your household. You sense that the contract today weds property and promise, but love may follow as seasons pass. Late into the night, you read by candlelight, memorizing each Latin clause so that at the wedding feast you can recite them with accurate voice. Crickets hum outside your window, and the castle walls stand silent in moonlight. You feel the weight of parchment and ink, as though it were a pair of scales carrying the hopes of 2 families. You close the book and rest, knowing tomorrow dawn brings tasks of preparing feasts, measuring linens, and polishing goblets until they gleam. The contract binds you even now. shaping your every breath until vows are sealed before altar and community. You awake before dawn, on the morning of the third day before the wedding. The castle still sleeps, and you slip from your chamber into the dim corridor, mindful of each soft footstep. Today you begin fasting to prepare body and soul. In medieval custom, fasting before marriage serves both purification and penance. You make your way to the chapel where flickering candles cast shadows on frescoed walls. You kneel at the altar and offer a silent prayer for guidance. Your hands rest on the smooth stone surface as you breathe deeply, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. You chant a prayer to Saint Valentine, asking for blessings on your union and for strength to honor your vows. After prayers, you return to the great hall where servants have prepared only a bowl of thin gruel for you and your bride. You share a quiet meal by the hearth, dipping stale bread into boiled oats. The meal tastes bland, yet you know its purpose is spiritual rather than pleasure. Your bride sits across the table and meets your eyes. Neither of you speaks. Instead, you share a moment of empathy for the shared sacrifice you make in giving up rich foods for days. At midday, a small flock of doves coos outside, reminding you of peace and fidelity. That evening, you and your bride join the rest of the household at the chapel's Vesper service. The village priest chants ancient hymns in Latin as the sun sets beyond stained glass windows. You hold a thin candle in each hand. The warm wax melts and drips onto your palms. You press your fingers together to gather the melted wax before it falls to the stone floor. As you thread your way through the pews, you pass wives in veils and maidens in simple gowns. All faces appear solemn yet hopeful. After the service, you remain kneeling before the altar while others file out. You whisper another prayer, confessing any secret doubts. You ask forgiveness for moments when your heart wandered, and you pledge to serve your bride with honesty and kindness. The priest lays his hand on your head and speaks words of absolution. You stand, feeling lighter both in spirit and purpose. Outside the chapel, night blends purple and silver. You walk back to the manor under a sky heavy with stars. A gentle breeze carries the scent of blooming jasmine from the courtyard garden, reminding you that even in cold days, spring returns. On the fourth day before the wedding, you rise with the sun and join other young men and women in the castle courtyard for caroling practice. In medieval custom, caroling around the manor and nearby village spreads joy and announces the coming celebration. You learn lyrics in Old English, praising both bride and groom and invoking blessings for harvest and hearth. The melody moves in simple intervals that you can grasp quickly. A small group of musicians brings a tambourine and a recorder. With their gentle rhythm, you walk from the courtyard to the village square, voices blending as you practice each stanza. In the village square, you see children dart between market stalls as you sing. Villagers stop their work, listening to the rising voices. Some clap hands quietly, others beat time on jars or stones. You see the blacksmith pause at the forge, hammer in hand, to join your refrain. You exchange smiles with a weaver who stands by her loom in the open doorway. The practice continues until midday sun warms the stone paving. You and the other carolers return to the manor, picking sprigs of holly from hedges to secure to your cloaks. Holly serves as festive decoration and symbol of protection. That evening, you attend a vigil in the courtyard. All eligible bachelors stand under candlelight to offer prayers while listening to a traveling monk read passages about marriage from the Epistle to the Ephesians. His deep voice echoes against stone walls. You kneel on straw scattered for the congregation, and you bring your candle closer to catch the flame. Ash drifts over your tunic. You feel a quiet peace in the vigil, surrounded by neighbors and kin. Each passage reminds you that marriage unites two bodies and two families. You vow to lead your household with compassion and justice. On the day before the wedding, you fast again until sunset. You spend the morning sitting in the lady's solar, embroidering a silk sleeve intended as part of your bride's trousseau. Each stitch you make carries a prayer for prosperity and health. You work on a small design showing interlaced vines and a pair of doves. The needle slips through fabric deftly under your careful eye. As you stitch, your mind wanders to the feast planned for tomorrow. You imagine tables filled with roasted meats and sweet tarts drizzled with honey. Yet you also know that your body will not taste these delights until the officiant pronounces you wed. At high noon, you attend a ceremony called the nuptial blessing. Priests assemble in the courtyard under a decorated canopy of woven silk and garlands of fresh flowers. You stand beside your bride, who wears a simple gown of unbleached linen under her veil. The local lord and his retinue stand behind you, offering solemn approval. A traveling cleric reads ancient verses from canon law about the sanctity of marriage. As he speaks, you feel the warmth of the crowd around you, neighbors, kin, and distant merchants. The breeze lifts your hair and carries sweet fragrance of juniper and sage burned in a small brazier. When the blessing ends, you and your bride return to your chambers to prepare for the midnight feast. Servants present a single loaf of bread, salted with herbs to share. You break it and feed pieces to your bride, and the steward who oversaw the preparations. This humble meal sustains you until the wedding dawn, when you may eat meat and drink wine. You rest a short while, knowing that sleep escapes you. Your mind spins with thoughts of tomorrow's ceremony, the long procession to the church, the priest's solemn words, and the communal feast prepared by dozens of hands. Before dusk, you gather in the courtyard to rehearse the procession. You and your bride stand side by side, each carrying a lantern carved from horn to light your path. You will walk from the manor gates to the church at the edge of the village. A small band of minstrels plays lute and tambourine. As you march, you hold your head high, mindful of every step. You practice curtsying to the mayor at the crossroads, where he will present a banner showing both family crests entwined. The banner symbolizes unity and shared heritage. After rehearsal, you join guests in the great hall for a modest supper of pottage and barley bread. The table holds pewter bowls filled with lentil stew and plates of dried apples warmed over coals. You sip thin ale from a wooden cup. Your father announces that tomorrow the feast will overflow with roasted boar and spiced wine. He reminds you that every guest must attend, from neighboring lords to humble farmers whose fields you commune for. You nod, understanding the weight of that responsibility. Late that night, you walk the castle roof's stone battlements with your bride. Each of you holds a small flickering torch. Together, you look out over the quiet village, where the only sound is the distant bark of a hound. The night sky gleams with stars unfamiliar to your mortal eyes. In that shared silence, you feel a bond deeper than any contract or blessing. You sigh, knowing that tomorrow daylight brings vows and celebrations. You slip back to the guest chamber, where soft furs line a pallet. You fall asleep quickly, grateful that the days of fasting and prayer now give way to vows and feasting at dawn. In these days before your wedding, you have walked a path of solemn preparation. You have fasted to humble your body. You have knelt to seek divine blessing. You have rehearsed processions and sung carols to spread joy. Each act has shaped you into the groom you must be. When dawn breaks tomorrow, you will stand before priest and people, ready to bind your family's future with your bride. Yet for now, the last hours of night envelop you in anticipation, faith, and respect for customs older than your own lifetime. The morning sun filters through narrow windows, and you wake before dawn once more. Today, you prepare for the final hours before the wedding feast. You begin by donning a simple linen shirt and woolen hose, fastening a leather belt around your waist. You walk across cold stone floor to the oratory, where flickering candles still burn from last night's vigil. Kneeling on a worn prayer mat, you recite psalms that speak of unity, love, and mercy. You seek strength and clarity, knowing that vows spoken today will shape your life permanently. You rise and swing open the heavy door, stepping into the courtyard where you join other young men gathering water for the bridal bath. Neighbors appear carrying wooden buckets of cold spring water, and women bear bundles of fresh herbs, lavender for calm, rosemary for remembrance, and thyme for courage. In medieval custom, the bridal bath cleanses not just the body but the spirit as well. You and the young men carry buckets to the bride's chamber, while her handmaidens gather in a circle. The bride kneels beside a low basin, and the handmaidens pour water over her hair as they whisper blessings. You hold a basket of linen cloth for her to dry her hands. The pale dawn light glows on her flushed cheeks, and she looks at you briefly with a nervous smile. Then the ritual ends, and she steps away to don her wedding gown. Meanwhile, you return to the great hall and see tables set for a midday feast. Wooden boards lie ready to receive salted fish, boiled roots, and simple bread. Servants organize platters of spiced wine and jars of honey for candying nuts. By late morning, the hall fills with guests wearing their best tunics and kirtles. You greet each visitor, the local reeve and his wife, the village blacksmith and his children, and riders from distant fiefs bearing gifts of cheese and furs. Each face smiles kindly as they offer well wishes. At high noon, the procession forms at the manor gate. Minstrels stand ready, holding lutes and flutes. A herald in bright green tabard calls the village to order. You stand beside your closest friends, gripping a small wooden staff carved with your family crest. Behind you, your bride appears, led by her father. She wears a gown of fine wool dyed deep blue with embroidered sleeves showing her family's emblem. Her veil shimmers with threads of gold. You feel your heart race as you step toward the church, escorted by your father and two older brothers. The road to the chapel runs between hedges heavy with ivy. Villagers line the path, bowing as you pass. Children wave garlands of flowers and toss petals at your feet. You offer polite bows in return, your gaze fixed on the stone facade of the church. Its dark doors stand open, revealing candlelight and the hushed murmur of parishioners inside. You and your bride enter last, pausing at the threshold to share a quick breath. Inside, the air feels cool and smells faintly of incense. The priest stands before a small table draped with white cloth. He offers a simple gesture of peace and calls everyone to silence. You kneel beside your bride at a low altar step. The priest opens a heavy book of Gospels and reads in Latin. Where there is love and wisdom, there is neither fear nor ignorance. You do not understand each word fully, but feel their solemn weight. Next, the priest lights a taper from the altar candles and hands it to you. You reach for your bride's hand, and together you lift the candle to light her small lantern. This act symbolizes unity and shared life. Flames flicker on her gentle face as she smiles at you. You feel warmth spread through your chest. The priest recites vows in Latin and you repeat after him in Old English. You speak slowly so your bride hears each word. The vows bind both of you, promising loyalty until death parts you. When you finish, you exchange rings. These simple bands of iron symbolize strength and union. You slide the ring onto her finger, and she slides one onto yours. The congregation murmurs blessings. After vows, you stand and turn to face the congregation as trumpets sound from the choir loft. You bow to the priest, and he blesses you. The sound of singing rises as carolers launch into a hymn of rejoicing. You share a glance with your bride, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Exiting the chapel, you travel back to the manor in procession. Villagers greet you at the gate with cheers and clapping. Servants scatter fresh straw along the path to cushion your steps. You step carefully, mindful of the straw cracking beneath your leather soles. Children toss handfuls of lavender buds for good fortune. At the great hall door, the local magistrate awaits to present you with a parchment confirming the union and listing dowry items. You sign the parchment with a flourish, your seal pressing into hot wax. Your bride stands beside you, and she signs with a small cross. 2 witnesses add their marks. This document will be preserved in the village archive to record your marriage for posterity. Inside the hall, the feast begins. Long tables groan under the weight of roasted boar stuffed with apples, jugs of mead infused with cloves, and pies of meat and almonds. You and your bride sit on a dais beneath tapestries depicting scenes from chivalric romance. A minstrel duo plays a lively tune as servants carve meat and pour wine. You lift a wooden cup and propose a toast to your new life together. Guests raise their goblets in unison and chant your names. The meal stretches into the afternoon. You savor spiced bread dipped in honey wine. You taste roasted partridge and tender venison stewed with root vegetables. Your bride leans close to speak memories of the chapel service, and you listen with fond admiration. Outside at the stable yard, you hear children shouting as they chase a goat. You know your new household will bring both sacred duty and earthly joys. Later, as dusk falls, you retire to a small chamber where bed linens have been arranged. The bed is draped in linen, embroidered with vines and doves. A curtain of silk hangs from its canopy to provide privacy. You and your bride slip inside and sit upon straw mattresses. Your heart pounds with anticipation and reverence, for this night marks the consummation of your union. You reach to draw the silk curtain closed. You breathe deeply and speak quietly of your hopes. You promise to protect her, share in her joys, and support her in times of need. She responds with gentle words of trust and faith. Outside, torches at the great hall gate dim as the village settles for the evening. The moon rises and weaves light through a small window. In that glow you feel the weight of tradition and the sweetness of hope. You rest your head beside your bride's and close your eyes. Tonight you have taken on roles that shape your future. You will learn to manage lands, share burdens, and nurture the next generation. But for now you savor the quiet peace and the promise of shared life. The candle beside you flickers low. You drift to sleep, knowing that dawn will bring new duties, but also the warmth of companionship. You rise before dawn and dress in a simple woolen tunic, edged with a narrow braid of colored thread. The fabric is coarse but warm against the chill of the stone chamber. You adjust the hem so it hangs evenly around your ankles, and you tie a linen belt around your waist. Your bride wears a fine linen kirtle, hand-dyed with a hint of saffron and trimmed in woven braid. Its folds fall softly from her shoulders, and she bears a simple white veil pinned at her brow. Neither of you wear finery of gold or gems. In medieval custom, the ceremony emphasizes piety and service rather than wealth. Together, you walk down the narrow corridor toward the castle's private chapel. Torches flicker along the walls and cast dancing shadows on the heavy wooden door. You pause at the threshold, offering a brief prayer of thanks. Your bride takes your arm, and you step forward into the dim interior. The chapel is long and narrow, with a low vaulted ceiling and narrow lancet windows set high above. The morning light filters through colored glass, painting the rough stone floors in hues of ruby and emerald. Incense lingers in the air, its sweet smoke winding among robed figures kneeling at the altar. At the entrance, 2 pages in simple tunics offer you candles borne in carved wooden holders. You grasp one and feel its weight as the thin taper glows with a steady flame. Your bride lifts her candle in a matching holder. Together you walk down the center aisle, pausing as you pass a choir of villagers softly chanting psalms in Old English. The voices echo against stone, rising and falling in a haunting melody. You hear words of praise and supplication for mercy and unity. Your gaze flicks to the choir's faces, young and old alike, each focused on service. When you reach the altar, you kneel on a cushion of velvet, embroidered with your family crest. The priest stands before an open book of Gospels, his hands raised in blessing. He wears a simple chasuble of unbleached linen, the surplice beneath falling in crisp folds. You watch as he raises the host and the chalice, a ritual reflecting the sacred bond of marriage. He intones a Latin invocation, asking for divine witness to your vows. Each word is crisp in the hush of the chapel, carrying weight for all who listen. The priest addresses you first. He speaks slowly in Old English, so you may understand fully. He asks, "Do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Do you promise to love her, honor her, and keep her in sickness and in health, forsaking all others until death you depart?" You raise your head from bowed shoulders. Your voice trembles slightly as you reply, "I do." The words fill the air and echo across the stone walls. You feel a tremor of awe, knowing that those two syllables bind you beyond all earthly measure. The priest turns to your bride, his gaze gentle but firm. He repeats the question to her, asking if she will take you as her husband, to love and honor in good times and in ill, until death parts you. She raises her veil and looks into your eyes. Her voice is soft but clear as she replies, "I do." You sense a swirl of relief and joy. Her sincerity touches you more deeply than any vow of land or coin. She kneels beside you, her candle flame flickering against her ivory skin. Next, the priest invites you both to rise. He stands and spreads his arms wide in blessing. He blesses the rings he holds in his palm, two simple bands of iron hammered smooth. In medieval custom, iron signifies strength and endurance. There is no gold or silver, for these rings represent only the bond of souls. The priest prays over the rings, anointing them with a drop of holy oil from a small vessel of brass. You reach forward and touch one ring between thumb and forefinger. The oil leaves a faint scent of balsam. You slip the iron band onto your bride's finger, fitting it around her delicate third finger of the left hand. The metal feels cool against her flesh. You see her pulse flutter beneath the skin. Your bride then takes the other ring and slides it onto the third finger of your left hand. The ring sits snug and firm. The priest kneels and places his hand on both your heads. He intones a final blessing in Latin, asking that your union be fruitful and your life together guided by faith. In that moment you feel a presence, as though unseen ancestors stand among you, bearing witness. As the priest steps back, you and your bride turn toward the congregation. The choir breaks into a hymn of rejoicing words, echoing through the vaulted ceiling. You both lift your candles and raise them skyward in triumph. The flame casts a holy glow upon your faces. You bow together to the altar, and then slowly turn and walk down the aisle, torches in hand. Villagers stand and clap softly as you pass. Their adulation feels warm, like a blanket shielding you from doubt. Emerging into the courtyard, you lower candles onto a simple wooden stand. Servants carry your simmering stew from the great hall and ladle it into wooden bowls. You dip bread into warm broth and hand a bowl to your bride. You share a quiet smile and taste the hearty fare. The meal is humble yet rich with symbolism, for breaking bread together underscores the unity born at the altar. Later, a traveling minstrel leads you both to the garden, where a small arbor of vine and laurel stands. Under its arch, you recite a psalm together in unison, your voices weaving into a single melody. Your bride's voice is light and clear, your own grown stronger by her presence. The words speak of mercy and blessing, asking that your household remains safe from strife. Guests and family gather beneath apple trees heavy with blossom. Vines of wisteria hang from wooden trellises, their scent mixing with the salty air from distant sea. After reciting the psalm, you release 2 doves from a small wicker cage. The birds circle overhead, cooing softly before flying away toward distant hills. In medieval symbol, the dove represents the Holy Spirit and the promise of peace. Watching them vanish beyond rooftops, you feel your own heart rise. As dusk arrives, priests return to read a final blessing by torchlight. They kindle a bonfire in the courtyard, casting light upon pottery jugs filled with new wine. You lift a cup and offer thanks to God for guiding your union. Your bride stands beside you holding a cup filled with mead from local bees. You clink the cups and sip in unison. The honey's sweetness tastes of hope. Throughout the evening, you both wear your simple rings as a sign to all that vows have been exchanged and ritually sealed. No rumble of thunder dares cross the horizon. Instead, stars appear one by one over the chapel spire. You trace their pale light with your eye and vow to honor the exchange you uttered before altar and people. When the wedding archivist opens his ledger, you offer the priest a quill. Standing before the altar once more, you sign the marriage record in Old English script. You steady your hand and carve each letter with care. Your bride then takes the quill and marks her name with a neat cross when she cannot write in Latin. A witness steps forward and magnifies the vow in his own hand. With each stroke of the quill, you feel the weight of promise settle within you. Outside, torches burn as the banquet continues. You walk through tables laden with roasted partridge and honeyed cakes. Guests greet you and offer gifts. A set of shears for your bride to use in spinning, a small chest of coins for your future larder, and a basket of silken yarn dyed with cochineal for fine embroidery. You bow to each donor and clasp hands as you pass. You realize that each gift represents a blessing and a role you will fulfill. Late into the night, you return to the chapel once more when the minstrels cease their playing. You kneel in silence and give thanks for the vows and the rings and the handmade linens that hold your names. You feel the cool stone beneath your knees, sturdy as any promise. Outside, the moon casts a silver sheen over the chapel roof. You look at your bride and take her hand. You speak a brief prayer, asking for guidance, mercy, and perseverance. She whispers, "Amen." Walking back to your chamber, you feel the iron ring cool against your skin, a constant reminder of your pledge. Your bride's hand feels soft as you guide her over smooth floor stones. The doors close behind you, and at last you stand alone within your own quarters. You help her remove her linen kirtle and hang it on a wooden peg. She smooths her veil and sets it beside her precious rings. You feel a swirl of exhaustion and joy. Tonight in the darkness, you reflect on the rituals that bound you both. You recall each step before the altar, each vow spoken in faithful hearts, and each blessing imparted by the priest. You sense that through ritual and prayer, you stand as one before God and community. Tomorrow you will awaken as husband and wife, shaped by the customs and faith of this medieval world. But for now you offer one final prayer, asking that your vows remain steadfast and that your union bear fruit in both children and splendor. As you lay down on your pallet of furs and linen, you feel a peace settle over your heart. You drift to sleep, believing that tomorrow's dawn will bring the first dawn of your life together. After the priest pronounces you and your bride, man and wife, you remain kneeling before the altar, while the congregation sings a final hymn of thanksgiving. You feel the weight of your robes and the warmth of the candlelight as the host is raised, and the choir's harmonies fill every corner of the stone chapel. After the hymn ends, the priest steps forward and sprinkles holy water over both of you, symbolizing cleansing and renewal. The water droplets land softly on your brows, and you bow your head in reverence. The priest then leads you to a small table beside the altar, where 2 chalices of wine and a small loaf of unleavened bread await. He invites you to share in the sacrament of Holy Communion with your bride. As he breaks the bread, he speaks quietly in Latin, and you repeat the words in Old English as you take the host into your hand. The taste is simple yet profound. You look at your bride and see a reflection of your faith in her eyes. When you both sip a little wine from the chalices, you feel warmth spread from your chest to the tips of your fingers. This act binds not just your bodies but your spirits in fellowship under God. Following communion, the priest returns to the altar. He lifts a small ornate basin filled with blessed water, and he sprinkles a few drops on the altar's flowers and on the still glowing candles. You watch as rays of light dance across the petals of crimson roses and violets lining the altar shelf. The scent of incense mixes with the fragrance of fresh flowers, creating a heady perfume that lingers in the air. Meanwhile, attendants quietly extinguish the side candles, leaving only the central candle to cast a steady glow on carved wooden pews. Next, the priest invites you to step forward and receive his final blessing. He makes the sign of the cross over you both, his fingers tracing an arc across your foreheads. He lays his hand on each of your heads in turn and speaks words of grace, asking that God showers you with wisdom and sustenance. You feel a gentle pressure of his palm, as though he channels calm and strength into your shoulders and down your arms. When he steps back, you and your bride kneel briefly, heads bowed, acknowledging the weight of his blessing. After the rite concludes, you stand and turn to face your congregation once more. The choir begins a final chant that echoes as you walk down the nave. The villagers stand in respectful silence, the light from high windows illuminating faces full of warmth and support. You step carefully over fallen petals strewn across the stone floor, their bright colors muted by the flickering torchlight. As you reach the entrance, you dip your head in a final salute to the priest and choir, then step outside into the cool midday air. Outside the chapel gates, you find a small group of children holding baskets of fresh herbs. They follow you with their baskets, offering sprigs of rosemary, basil, and parsley for luck and prosperity. You accept a sprig of rosemary and hand a coin to one of the children. The child's grin is bright as sunlight on fresh linen. You tuck the rosemary into your tunic, feeling its aromatic scent soothe your spirit. Your bride carries a small garland of daisies, tied with a ribbon of deep purple, the color of royalty and devotion. A canopy of woven cloth awaits at the base of the chapel steps. Beneath its shade you find 4 pairs of neighbors, dressed in simple tunics and kirtles. As you step forward, they fill colored pouches with rice and toss handfuls toward you and your bride. Each grain that falls on your shoulders represents fertility and abundance. You laugh as sticky grains of rice settle into your hair and fall onto your tunic. Your bride giggles as a stray grain lands on her veil. Children chase nearby to scoop up what remains, squealing with delight. After the rice blessing, you climb into a small cart decorated with ribbons and flowers. 2 stout horses stand ready to draw you toward the manor. You feel the cart's wooden bed give beneath you as you settle beside your bride. The harness bells jingle a soft rhythm. As the horses trot forward, you glance at your bride and offer a reassuring smile. Dust from the rutted road rises in small clouds, but you pay it no mind. Your focus stays on her hand resting atop yours, thumb brushing gently against knuckles. Along the road, villagers line the path to the manor gates. Some hold simple banners painted with symbols of peace and harvest. Others beat small tambourines, clapping the beat as the cart passes. You nod and bow to each group, thanking them for their presence and blessings. An elderly woman dips her hand into a bowl of cooled mead and sprinkles a few drops over the cart's wheels. She murmurs a prayer for the road ahead, to remain safe and flat for your journey together. You offer her a respect bow and continue on. When the cart arrives at the manor gates, you dismount with your bride. The courtyard now bursts with activity. Tables stand loaded with fine dishes, roast fowl garnished with fresh herbs, plates of spiced fruit and nuts, and bowls of creamy porridge made from barley. Large jugs of spring water sit alongside casks of ale and wine for toasting. You and your bride pause to admire the feast laid out in your honor, then step through the gates as neighbors applaud. Your father meets you at the steps of the great hall wearing a wide smile. He holds your hand and guides you toward the high table where noonday banquet awaits. Your mother stands beside him, her eyes shining with pride. She wears a simple but elegant gown of fine wool, embroidered with floral motifs. You exchange a brief embrace with your father and thank him for guiding you through negotiation and betrothal. He clasps your shoulder firmly and mumbles words of approval. Seated at the high table, you and your bride receive first portions of the feast. A herald stands by with a large parchment scroll. He begins to read aloud the terms of your marriage contract and the dowry arrangements. He recites in clear Latin each clause regarding property transfers, service obligations, and provisions for heirs. You and your bride exchange glances, as you recognize each term you negotiated earlier. As he speaks, a servant pours wine into your goblets. You raise the cup to your lips and taste the sweet spiced flavor. It warms your throat and settles in your chest like a promise. After the scroll reading, the guests rise to their feet and cheer in unison. The banquet then begins in earnest. Minstrels play lively tunes on lutes and recorders from a small gallery above the hall doors. You and your bride dip bread in honeyed wine and share morsels of roast partridge and spiced apples. The meal becomes a celebration of community, each bite a reminder of the support and kindness woven into your union. Later in the afternoon, you step aside for a private ceremony called the nuptial blessing. The local bishop arrives in full vestments and places his hand on both your heads. He recites special blessings for married couples, imploring God to grant you prosperity and children. When the bishop concludes, he hands each of you a small scroll sealed in wax. The scrolls contain prayers and instructions for daily life, guidelines for grace before meals, counsel to honor each other, and reminders to give alms to the poor. You tuck the scrolls into your belts as sacred guides to follow throughout marriage. As twilight deepens, a final ritual unfolds. You and your bride approach a small trough hewn from oak and filled with clear spring water. Guests gather around holding lit candles. The priest dips both your hands into the water and washes them gently. He speaks a blessing over the water, invoking purity and renewal. Each drop that runs down your hands cleanses your heart and mind. You clasp your bride's hand and help her step forward. When she lifts her hands from the water, droplets fall to the stone floor. You gesture to the congregation, and they murmur words of praise. After the hand washing, you place a single sprig of rosemary and a single sprig of lavender into the water. These herbs signify remembrance and devotion. Each sprig floats briefly before sinking to the bottom, unseen by onlookers. The act signals that your love will rest in humility and faith. The chapel doors remain open as the day ends and stars appear. You walk back through the great hall, hand in hand with your bride. Guests line the hall, offering final blessings and non-perishable gifts, loaves of bread, jars of honey, and small bags of mixed spices. A neighbor hands you a wooden box carved with dovetail joints containing local coin. He says that it is a gift for your new household, so that it may start with a modest treasury. You thank him and promise to share future harvests when coins run scarce. Finally, you and your bride retire to the bridal chamber prepared for you. The room glows with candlelight, and the air smells of fresh straw and lavender. The sheets on the bed are linen, starched and embroidered with a delicate pattern. You help your bride remove her linen kirtle and gently hang it on a peg by the door. She gives you a small carved wooden comb for your hair, a keepsake meant to remind you of patience and careful thought. You bow your head in gratitude. She smiles and presses a small kiss against your cheek. In the quiet of the chamber, you kneel on a small prayer mat once more. You recite a final prayer together, seeking grace for the days ahead. Your voices rise and fall in unison, a private conversation with God. After the prayer, you rise and guide your bride to the bed. You lay her down and help ease the heavy wedding cloak from her shoulders. You feel the weight of the ring on your finger and her warm hand resting atop yours. As you slip inside the sheepskin covering, you feel the promise of tomorrow already taking shape. Your wife's breath deepens as she drifts to sleep, trust evident even in that soft exhale. You settle beside her and feel gratitude for the rituals that guided you here, the vows spoken in the stone chapel, the keen negotiations, the shared fasts and blessings, each wrought in faith and community, each a thread woven into the tapestry of your new life. Tonight you rest in the hush of candle shadows, knowing that dawn will bring new duties and joys. But in these final hours before your wedding night ends, you hold the hand of your bride, and know that vows and rings have bound you both in faith and commitment. Under the glow of moonlight, slanting through a small window, you close your eyes and drift into sleep, united in purpose and love as husband and wife. You awaken on the morning after the wedding and find the castle courtyard already alive with activity. Tents of vibrant cloths line one side of the square. Each tent bears banners in the heraldic colors of your family and the bride's family. You step outside wearing a plain linen shirt beneath a leather jerkin. Your bride, fresh from her chamber, stands beside you in a simple gown of woven wool trimmed with bright embroidery. Both of you smell the lingering scent of incense as torchbearers move through the stone corridors. Today, the community gathers to celebrate your union with a feast, games, and dancing that will last through the day. You walk across flagstones to the green, where knights prepare for a tournament. Wooden barriers mark a jousting field. Lords and squires adjust their steeds' caparisons and fit lightweight armor tailored for the occasion. You step closer as two knights in polished helmets muster their lances and take oaths to fight fairly. One knight raises his visor and bows to you. You nod in return, acknowledging his pledge. The herald stands between them and signals the start. At his cry, both riders spur their horses forward and charge. Their lances strike shields with a thunderous crack. Sand flies as the horses slide to a halt. One knight loses his lance and slips from the saddle, only to be caught safely by his squire. The crowd claps and cheers. A minstrel standing nearby plays a triumphant tune on a small lute. You feel pride in the spectacle. After the first tilt pair moves aside and a second pair enters the field, each knight's banner flutters in the breeze, and you notice one bears the crest of a neighboring baron who joined your alliance through marriage. This tournament will determine the champion of your wedding day and earn him a purse of gold coins. As the day unfolds, several pairs of knights take to the field. You stand with your bride near a wooden table bearing jugs of cool ale. You pour 2 mugs and offer one to her. She takes it gratefully and sips. The taste of hops mingles with the fresh morning air. While the tournament continues, you walk toward a row of stalls where craftsmen display wares. A blacksmith shows off a newly forged sword decorated with fine silver inlay. You pick up the blade, feeling its weight in your hand, and test the balance. He explains that he made this sword specially for the winner of the joust. Nearby, a bowyer offers longbows crafted from yew. He demonstrates the bow's pull and tells tales of archers at Agincourt. A fletcher stands close by with arrows fletched in bright feathers. Your bride smiles at you when you ask the fletcher about arrow flight. She holds your hand, and you feel warmth in her glance. As midday approaches, the herald calls a brief pause in the jousting. You and the assembled crowd move to long tables set beneath woven cloth canopies. Each table holds wooden trenchers heaped with roasted meat, bowls of bean stew, fresh baked bread, and platters of cheese. Huge ceramic bowls brimming with roasted nuts and dried fruits sit in the center. Servants bring jugs of wine infused with mint and cool jugs of ale, chilled by adding ice taken from a nearby stream the night before. You take your place at the high table beside your bride. A steward brings a large bowl of barley stew thick with chunks of mutton. You ladle a portion into your trencher and pass it to her. She nods and takes a spoonful. The warmth of the broth spreads through her. You share a loaf of bread, tearing pieces to dip in melted butter and honey. Lords offer toasts and raise their cups in unison. A neighboring lord stands and pledges to your union. He holds his cup high and proclaims, "May this marriage bind 2 noble houses and bring peace to our lands." The crowd cheers. You lift your cup in return, echoing his sentiment. The smell of roasting meat drifts from skewers set up over open coals just behind the tables. An ox turned slowly on a spit bastes in dripping fats, sending savory aromas across the courtyard. You follow the smell and see the ox's skin crisping to golden brown. A group of servants stands ready to carve sections of lean beef, passing them to guests on wooden platters. You accept a slice, its juice still warm, and taste the deep flavor of land and fire. While the feast continues, the tournament resumes. Several young knights who sought honor at the joust find their proudest moment. One young squire, just coming of age, rides with a lance carved from oak. His banner bears a simple white dove. You watch as he charges his first opponent. Though his technique lacks finesse, he rides with bold heart. His lance strikes squarely on his opponent's shield, and the crowd roars at his success. You clap your hands and cheer, feeling pride that youthful courage still finds reward. When the last tilt ends, you walk with your bride through the marketplace stalls set beside the green. A juggler performs near a ring of peasants and children. He tosses 3 balls into the air and catches them with deft flicks of his wrist. You pause to watch as he ups the stakes, juggling a 4th ball and adding a torch that he spins before dropping safely into a bucket of sand. You toss a few coins into the hat at his feet. He bows and nods in thanks, his acrobatics leaving you smiling. Nearby, a group of children play a game with sticks and a small wooden hoop. They take turns striking the hoop to see how far it will roll. Their laughter rings clear as bells across the courtyard. Late in the afternoon, the herald announces the start of the dancing. A band forms beneath a hastily erected pavilion. 2 fiddlers, a pipe player, and a drummer beat out a cheerful tune. You step onto a cleared square of grass. Your bride steps beside you, her gown swaying as she moves. A local dance master calls out steps. Take 4 steps to the right, then turn and take 2 steps forward. Now bow to your partner. You follow his directions. The pattern of steps feels intuitive, as though a rhythm pulses through your bones. You and your bride turn together and bow to one another. Around you, other couples dance in tight circles or perform simple line dances. Each footfall generates dust that shimmers like gold in the dying light. Children join in too, pairing off with neighbors and linking arms to spin in a rough circle. Their laughter sounds as clear as child chimes. You watch as a young maiden trips over her gown hem and falls into a small heap of grass. A kindly knight helps her to her feet while nearby guests applaud her spirited attempt. You note how the simple act of movement brings everyone together in communal joy. After dancing, you return to the feast as the sun sinks toward the western hills. The tables now hold bowls of spiced tarts and platters of candied nuts, jugs of sweetened wine mingled with ginger and cinnamon steam in the late light. You take a cup and sip the warm liquid. It tastes of harvest apples and distant lands from where spices came by caravan. You pass the cup to your bride, who sips and stares ahead, as though tasting promise. As evening settles dark, torches encircle the courtyard, and a small bonfire flames in the center. Villagers gather on benches around the fire. An elderly bard mounts a low platform and begins a tale of star-crossed lovers who found fortune through marriage. His voice rises and falls. You watch flickers of torchlight dance across his weathered face. His tale weaves past knights and kings, but ends in humility and truth. At its close, the crowd murmurs blessings, and you see tears glisten in your bride's eyes. Neighbors now gather in small groups to share songs and stories. A fiddler steps forward and plays a lament for parted lovers who died at sea. Others join in with low voices, their melody rising to meet the night wind. You hold your bride close as you listen. The sorrow in the music reminds you of life's fleeting joys and the promise you have made to stand by her through both joy and sorrow. Late in the night, the feast begins to wind down. You walk hand in hand with your bride toward private chambers where a small fire still burns in a brazier. Servants remove the last of the feast dishes and lower the embroidery curtains around the bed. Inside, you see furs laid beside a simple bed of wool, stuffed into linen. Above hangs a small tapestry of ivy and roses. You kneel by the bedside and offer a final prayer of thanks. Your bride leans against the wall holding a small taper. You offer her a final sip from a wooden bowl filled with milk sweetened with honey. She tastes it and offers it back to you. Together, you sip and feel the sweetness warm your bellies. Outside, torches burn low, casting flickers of light onto the stone floor. The courtyard now quiet, except for the crackle of embers and distant hoot of an owl. You help your bride to her chamber and close the heavy oak door behind you. She removes her shoes and steps onto a small rug at the foot of the bed. You stand by and pull his gown from your shoulders, your breath shallow with anticipation. Without a word, she steps onto the bed, and the two of you lie beneath the linens. You take her hand and feel her pulse steady beneath your palm. In the hush of the chamber, you reflect on the day's feast and games. You think of bright banners, ringing steel on steel, and the sound of laughter beneath sunlit skies. You think of the dance, the music, and the buried sorrow behind every tale. You look at your bride's face in the dim candlelight and realize that together you will face both joy and sorrow. You vow to honor the promise made before altar and community, as hearts now bound by love and duty. You close your eyes and feel the peace of her presence. You sense the bond formed by feast games, and celebration will guide you through the years. As you drift towards sleep, you hear the distant echo of a final fiddle note, as though the day's joy lingers in the rafters and the night sky cradles your shared future. You rise before dawn and slip into your woolen tunic. As a newly married man of the manor, you bear duties beyond marital vows. Today you will oversee lands, negotiate contracts with tenants, and assert authority over your household. Managing a medieval estate demands constant vigilance and firm resolve. You step into the solar where your steward waits with parchment and ink. He carries the day's accounts, sums owed by tenants for rent, lists of serfs assigned to tasks, and records of recent harvest yields. You stand beside a heavy oak table and lean over the parchment spread before you. The steward reads aloud each entry. 4 shillings owed by Master Thomas for his cottage, 8 bushels of barley promised by Farmer Edric at Michaelmas, and coal to be delivered for winter fires. You nod as he speaks, memorizing each detail. If you falter in these numbers, your household may suffer shortages or lose respect among neighbors. Today you plan to finalize the contract with a neighboring lord to exchange grazing rights. You will ride across fields to inspect the boundary where your sheep graze. The steward hands you a leather purse tied snug with a drawstring. Inside lie silver pennies collected as fines for late payments. You count them once again, before tucking the purse into your belt. Next, you gather a small packet of rolled parchments detailing previous agreements. You want to remind the other lord of his grandfather's covenant, so that he respects current terms. With quill tucked behind your ear, you nod at the steward and stride toward the courtyard. In the courtyard, your bailiff and reeve wait for you. The bailiff holds a staff carved with simple runes that signify his office. He bows and says quietly that the new youth assigned to herd cattle failed to appear. You frown and tell him to summon the lad and assess a small fine. If servants relent at the first chance they weaken your household structure, you decree that the bailiff track the youth to. You awake before dawn to the faint glow of embers in the hearth. You rise carefully from the straw mattress and slip into your linen shift. The first task of the day is to rake the embers from last night's fire and gather fresh kindling. You step outside into the cool air, bending to pull dry sticks from the hearth woodpile. You return and build a small fire beneath a clay pot of water. As the fire crackles, you pour cold water from a bucket into the pot. Soon steam rises and you ladle a bit into a wooden bowl for your husband's morning tea. You carry it carefully down the hall to the solar, where he reads parchments by candlelight. You set the bowl on a small bench and bow your head briefly over a silent prayer for his safety. After the fire is lit, you move to the loom, set in the corner of your chamber. You sit upon a low stool and unwind a bobbin of wool spun yesterday. You tuck the bobbin into your apron and adjust the warp threads on the loom's frame. You steady your legs on a wooden treadle beneath the bench When you depress it with your foot, the loom lifts the threads to form a shed, through which you pass a shuttle wrapped in dyed wool. The shuttle glides through the shed, and you lift the weft gently into place. With each pass of the shuttle, your cloth grows, inch by inch. You focus on keeping the threads even, mindful that uneven weaving now will result in ragged hems later. As you weave, you recite quietly a prayer to Saint Anne, patroness of mothers and weavers. You ask her to guide your hands so that each cloth becomes strong and lasting. By mid-morning, the cloth measures 5 spans long. You lift it from the loom and drape it over a beam to air. You measure and cut lengths for a new tunic you will make for your eldest son. You carry the bolts of cloth to a small wooden bench where your daughter waits. She sits cross-legged on the floor with a handful of flax fibers in her lap. You teach her to roll flax into a ball so that it may feed the spinning distaff. When the flax is ready, you show her how to hold the spindle's wooden shaft and spin each fiber into a fine thread. Her small hands move clumsy at first, but soon she finds rhythm. You smile as she spins, knowing that by her 9th year she will weave cloth for her own children. You tie a strand of spun wool to the spindle and show her how to wrap it around the spindle's shaft. It spins freely, collecting new thread with each rotation. She watches the fibers twist into yarn and gasps at their transformation. The midday sun warms the thatched roof and draws you into the kitchen. You set fresh clothes aside and put on an apron of sturdy linen. You rake back the fire's coals and set a large iron pot into the soot-blackened hook above the flames. You add lard, rendered from last season's pork, to the pot and let it melt. You take a handful of chopped onions and dice them with a sharp knife. You toss onions into the melted lard and stir until they brown slightly. The smell wafts through the room and draws your younger daughter from her play in the yard. She stands at the doorway, eyes wide. You nod that she may help. She fetches carrots and parsnips from the storage chest at your feet. You chop root vegetables into rough chunks and add them to the pot. Next, you fetch dried herbs from a clay jar on a shelf. You pinch rosemary and thyme between calloused fingers and sprinkle them into the bubbling stew. You then fetch a small sack of barley and pour a handful into the simmering mixture. You fill the pot with water drawn from the well until the stew bubbles in gentle waves. While the stew simmers, you knead dough for bread. You measure flour and salt in a wooden bowl and stir together. You add water warmed by the fire and mix until the dough clings to your hands. You knead on a floured board until the dough springs back when you press a finger. You shape 2 loaves and place them on a flat stone beside the hearth. You cover them with a cloth and set them near the warm coals to rise. As the loaves rise, you tend your infant son. He cries at the sound of the spoon clanking against the wooden bowl. You pick him up, cradle him against your chest, and soothe him with gentle rocking. With a small thimble, you test a finger of warm water on his lips. Satisfied it will not burn, you let him feed from a small leather pouch filled with thin barley gruel. He sucks eagerly, his tiny fists clenching your shift. You smile at his contentment. Once he finishes, you burp him gently and lay him on a soft blanket in the corner of the kitchen. You glance at him as you resume work, vowing to protect his health and nurture his growth. By mid-afternoon, you dress in your simple kerchief and retrieve the freshly woven cloth from the beam. You bring it to your chamber and cut pieces for the tunic. Using sharpened shears, you cut 2 rectangles of equal length and pin them together at the shoulders. You measure the length of his torso and mark where the tunic should end. You pin hems and stitch with a length of spun wool. Each stitch you make pulls the cloth together, forming a garment that will keep him warm through chill seasons. You fit a small opening for his head and stitch a narrow hood from leftover scraps. You try to imagine him running across fields wearing this tunic, the color bright against muddy earth. Late in the afternoon, you walk through the courtyard to check on your hens. A neighbor's child follows, clutching a small basket. You show him how to gather eggs from beneath straw bedding in the hen house. He laughs as a hen squawks and flutters to protect her nest. You reach in gently and lift a warm egg into the basket. You tell the child that eggs will mix into your bread at dawn. He nods and looks proud of his contribution. You return to the stew in the kitchen. It has thickened, and the aroma fills every corner. You stir and taste a spoonful, adding a pinch of salt. You bow your head in gratitude for the harvest. The pot bubbles as flames leap around its base. You scoop a portion into a wooden bowl and carry it outside to a group of servants. They wait near the barn, their faces lined with toil. You hand each a bowl and they squat on a rough log to eat. Their gratitude shows in their eyes. You nod and return to the hearth, determined to nurture your household. As dusk falls, you gather your daughters and teach them prayers beside the hearth. You say a prayer for provision. Grant us this day our daily bread, and let our hands be strong in labor. Each girl repeats after you. You then instruct them on basic sewing. You hand each a needle and a scrap of cloth. You guide their small fingers as they thread and stitch simple hems. You tell them that these skills will serve them well when they marry someday. They listen with bright eyes, eager to learn. Later in the evening, you join your husband in the solar. He holds a small scroll bearing requests from neighbors for help during harvest. He asks you to arrange for extra loaves of bread and fresh stew to feed working hands. You nod and promise to have the kitchen prepare large pots for morning. He smiles and thanks you, acknowledging the countless tasks you perform. You offer him a simple cup of warm ale, and he sips gratefully. After the evening meal, you walk with your husband through the courtyard. Torchlight casts long shadows as night air turns cool. You point to a group of spinning wheels set on a wooden bench. Several village women gather there, each with a spindle and distaff. You show your daughters how to sit at the wheel and feed flax from the distaff. When the wheel turns by foot, the spindle moves and catches fine fibers. You guide their feet on the treadle and their hands along the flax. They giggle as the last rays of sunset fade. You tell them to practice each evening until they perfect the stroke. Returning inside, you fetch a cloth and wipe ash from the hearth stones. You gather hot coals and spread them evenly for tomorrow's fire. You place a small pot of warm water near the hearth to heat for the morning. You stir the coals until a soft glow remains, then add a few new sticks to keep a steady flame. You check on the bread rising near the hearth and see it has doubled in size. You cover it with linen to rest overnight. In the final hours of the day, you nurse your infant again. He wails for a last meal before sleep. You feed him barley gruel until his chubby cheeks glow with contentment. You lay him on a sheepskin and wrap him snugly. He drifts to sleep in minutes. You kiss his small forehead and whisper a blessing for his growth. At last, you wash your hands in a basin of warm water and wash the flour from your cloth. You slip into a coarse shift and lie down on your straw mattress beside the hearth. A small curtain of wool hangs to separate your sleeping space from the rest of the cottage. The glow of the embers dances on the wall. You close your eyes and recall the work of the day, spinning yarn with your daughter, stirring hearty stew, weaving cloth for your son's tunic, and guiding the prayer before bed. You feel the ache of muscles warmed by labor. Despite weariness, you feel pride in your role. As a medieval wife, you wield authority over daily chores and nurture the household's health and spirit. You manage provisions for your family and servants. You shape cloth that provides warmth. You teach children to value skill and faith. In every task, you fulfill social expectations, preserving community and family ties. You drift to sleep, knowing that dawn will bring new chores, mending baskets, tending the garden, and weaving more cloth by the hearth. But in each day you find purpose and meaning, building a home with your own hands. You trust that through perseverance and devotion, you secure a future for your children and honor your husband's trust. With that thought you rest, ready at first light to labor again in the rhythm of domestic life. You awake to the sound of roosters crowing and recall that today you will walk the fine line between family legacy and personal security. In medieval custom, marriage often transferred a woman's property and rights into her husband's hands. Yet widows could reclaim certain holdings and maintain a modest livelihood on their own terms. As husband or wife, you must understand how property passes and what safeguards exist for those left bereft by death. On the morning of your own wedding, you exchanged vows and rings before an altar's candlelight. Yet those words did more than bind two hearts. They also changed titles. Whatever lands and movable goods you brought as dowry became your husband's to manage. Your father's gift of cloth and coins that you carried to the manor illustrate this shift. In exchange, your husband granted you a dower life interest in a portion of his lands. In most regions, the dower consisted of 1/3 of his estate's value. Should your husband die, you would hold that third for your support. You remember that while growing up you saw noble widows riding through the market town. They wore veils of deep black and rode atop palfreys whose trappings spoke of status. Each carried a small purse of silver within a belt tied around her waist. Those women walked with dignity because they held dower lands that put coin in their purses each month. In the weeks following your own marriage, you learn to respect the value of dower. One morning, your husband shows you the list of his holdings. A parcel of meadow by the river yields hay for his cattle. A small vineyard on a nearby hill produces grapes for wine. Fields of barley and rye complement 10 cottages whose tenants pay rent. From this whole, he designated to you 3 of the cottages and the adjoining plot of meadow as your life interest. He did so under the supervision of the steward. The stewards produced a charter sealed with wax bearing a ringed imprint from his signet. By its terms, you enjoy profits from those cottages and the hay from the meadow. The rest reverts to him or to heirs after your death or remarriage. The charter remains locked in a wooden chest within the manor's solar. The steward allows you to consult it when needed. This document spells out that no one may evict you from your dower holdings. Should your husband die, you remain in your cottage and collect rents. A back portion of the produce from the meadow belongs to you each season. Yet your husband remains alive and well. You ride each week to inspect the cottages where the tenants live. You pass by thatched roofs rising from gardens of herbs and vegetables. You greet the women hanging laundry on lines. You ask if they paid this quarter's rent. Some hand you a handful of silver pennies. Others, who fared poorly under droughts, show bruised vegetables and ask for half the rent to be forgiven. Under the charter's terms, you may reduce rent without his approval up to a small fraction. You weigh each request with care. Knowing mercy can foster loyalty. In time, a chapel summons you to witness your husband's last wishes. He lies ill on a wooden pallet before the fire. He asks that you promise to continue caring for the tenants in those 3 cottages. He reminds you that they rely on you for their security. You hold his hand and nod. Under breath, you pray for his recovery. Yet you know that death is more certain than sunrises. You vow you will hold the dower lands with grace, and that you will not remarry lightly, for doing so forfeits your dower. In medieval custom, a widow who remarries loses her right to the previous husband's life interest. When news arrives that your husband has passed along a chill night, the steward confirms his death. He closes the door of the chamber and drapes black cloth across the handle. You dress in widow's weed-scorched black linen and attend the funeral mass. In the chapel, you kneel at the altar, and the priest intones prayers for the repose of his soul. After the service, you stand and see your tenants kneeling behind you. Their eyes hold sorrow. They bow their heads when you offer your thanks. You know that your presence here assures them they will not face eviction. As a widow, you hold new authority. You procure a small horse and bridle from the stable. You ride to inspect the cottages that now belong to you by right. You find that Master Gerard lives in one. He carries a wooden staff and greets you with a sigh. He hands you a basket of eggs and says that this season's grain yield was small. You nod, recalling the agreement your husband made with this tenant to reduce rent in years of poor harvest. You repeat that reduction and add free firewood for the winter. The tenant bows low with gratitude. You feel the power and the burden of responsibility as land at the edge of his cottage bears your husband's name carved into a simple wooden marker. Next, you cross the meadow by the river, where 10 heads of hay lie cut. You speak to the haywood who stands by a small wagon. You confirm that half this year's hay has been set aside for your use. The remaining half goes to pay the heirs who will soon claim a portion of the estate. You instruct the haywood to stack your share neatly near your cottage gate. You imagine packing bales into a small barn behind the cottage, using straw later for the children's mattress. Inheritance customs differ by region. In some places, a deceased widower's nearest young son inherits the bulk of the estate. In other locales, if there is no male heir, lands pass to daughters who then hold them in trust for future husbands. Your own husband left no male children, only your young daughter. Under local custom, your daughter inherits all lands. But as she is but a toddler, you hold her inheritance in wardship until she comes of age. In the meantime, you govern the entire estate, the cottages, the meadow, the vineyards, and the barley fields. You know you must prepare her holdings to pass to her when she marries. In this role, you travel to the town hall to meet the magistrate. He confirms your wardship over the lands until your daughter's 14th year. He swears you to manage faithfully. He instructs you that no sale of lands may occur without his consent. You nod and sign his parchment with a neat cross. A wave of relief washes over you. You know that without such confirmation, any male relative might claim the estate. Now you hold legal right to govern. Late that spring, you send the steward and the reeve to collect rents from tenants of the remaining cottages. They furnish you with a list of goods received: sacks of barley, fresh eggs, and a small payment in silver for those who lacked produce. You note that one cottage lies empty. The hearth there lies cold. You invest in repairing the thatch and replacing a broken window. When the cottage stands ready, you invite young Humphrey, orphan of a poor widow, to live rent-free until he comes of age. You do this knowing that a servant from one of the manors must reduce the estate's labor burden. In this act, you foster loyalty and gratitude. By midsummer, you ride to inspect the vineyard. Your servant Joseph leads you through green rows of vines heavy with fruit. He plucks a grape and offers it to you. You taste its sweet juice and promise to have more space pruned for sun. The yield will fill small casks for the winter feast. You recall your husband's laughter when he first found you there, as you spoke of including your daughter's name on a barrel lead sealed with wax. You carry that memory within your heart. When autumn arrives, the barley harvest yields less than expected. You remind tenants of last year's concession. You instruct the reeve to hand each affected family a small bag of grain from your dower stores. They bow and murmur thanks. You watch as families carry grain back to their cottages. You feel the weight of both goodwill and cost. As widow, you must stretch every resource wisely to honor your husband's memory and to build your daughter's future. During winter, you ride to the nearby friary to attend vespers. The friar welcomes you and offers you a bowl of thin broth. You lean by the stone wall and the friar speaks of the virtue in providing for the needy. He reminds you that alms given preserve the soul. You respond that you gave a basket of dried bread to the beggar at the gate. You speak of your daughter's inheritance and your vow to protect it. The friar blesses you and prays that your daughter's life be long and fruitful. As candlelight dances on ancient stone, you recall that your right to the dower ends if you remarry. Some widows choose a second husband to bolster finances or provide companionship, yet you remain resolved to maintain autonomy for yourself and for your daughter. You rise from your stool and return to the cold courtyard where only the sound of your boots crunching snow breaks silence. Inside your cottage, you stoke the hearth's embers. You press a fresh loaf of barley bread against your lips, tasting the crumbs' warmth. The children sleep in a corner on straw mats. You gaze at their faces, knowing that your daughter's inheritance ensures their survival. You take a small wooden chest from a shelf and unlock it. Inside lie coins you saved from rent and sale of excess wine. You count each penny, determining how many to spend on seed oil and wax for candles. You slip the chest back on its shelf and close the latch. As night deepens, you read by lantern light a copy of the charter that defines your daughter's inheritance. You trace the letters with your finger, her name, your husband's, and your own. You vow to sustain these lands until she stands in the chapel to wed a husband fit for her station. You envision a future where she holds dower lands of her own and grants security to a daughter yet unborn. You see how the chain of inheritance binds future generations. Tomorrow you will summon the steward and reeve to plan seed sowing so that the lands yield grain next summer. You will collect rents from tenants for the final time before the harsh winter snows. You will provide a small portion of grain to those in need. You will continue to manage the lands, guard contracts, and preserve the estate for one day passing to your daughter. For now you lay aside the parchment, extinguish the lantern, and crawl beneath quilts thick with wool. You gaze at the slivered moonlight on the rafters. You reflect on how marriage changed your rights once, and how widowhood changed them again. You sense that your life has become a tapestry of responsibilities woven from land, family, and faith. You close your eyes and offer a final prayer for your daughter's long life, and for your own strength in carrying forth this legacy. In medieval custom, a widow's right to own property sets her apart. You rest tonight secure in the knowledge that your stewardship endures until her time comes to inherit and govern in her own name. You awake to a cold wind rattling the shutters and recall rumors swirling through the village about Lord Geoffrey's wife. They say she spent nights with a travelling minstrel and that her husband discovered their dalliance. In medieval times, such scandal can unravel entire households. Today you will examine how infidelity could lead to punishments, annulments, and church tribunals. If you or your wife strays from the marriage bed, the consequences can be severe. Imagine you catch wind that a servant saw your wife slipping from the barn at midnight to meet the blacksmith in secret. You feel shock and betrayal. In medieval custom, adultery is a sin and a crime. Your first step is to bring the matter to your local priest. You dress in your simplest tunic and walk to the chapel at dawn. The stone walls feel cold as you enter. You approach the altar where the priest kneels before a crucifix. You bow your head in greeting and wipe your sleeve across your brow. The priest rises and asks why you have come. You explain the rumor and ask what recourse remains. He responds that the church may convene a tribunal to hear evidence. The priest instructs you to gather witnesses. In medieval courts, 2 or 3 sworn men must attest to adultery. You summon the steward and the reeve. At midday they meet you in the manor's solar. You recount the tale. Last night a servant watched Lady Isabel depart the kitchen and slip toward the blacksmith's forge. She returned long after midnight with straw in her hair. You speak firmly, voice echoing against oak beams. The steward and reeve exchange glances. They know that such claims demand proof, and that false accusations carry penalties. You ask them to accompany you to the blacksmith's barn to inspect for footprints or signs. They nod and collect their staffs. Together you travel to the barn where the blacksmith heats iron. The forge glows orange, and the blacksmith pauses his work to meet you. He bows and asks what you seek. You point to footprints left in fresh straw beside the forge. He cannot deny the shape of a woman's foot alongside his own. He averts his eyes and mumbles that he saw your wife pass by the barn that night. You feel anger rise in your chest. The blacksmith's shoulders slump, and he confesses that they met silently. You withdraw and decide to summon a church tribunal. That afternoon you send word to the bishop's vicar, wishing a formal hearing. A notice goes up in the chapel entrance. All those with knowledge of Lord Geoffrey's household are to present themselves at midday on the morrow. Rumours spread throughout the village like wildfire. By dawn, villagers line the chapel steps, eager to learn what transpires. At noon, the bishop's vicar arrives, flanked by 2 deacons. They enter the chapel, a hush falling as they take seats on a raised dais. You stand beside the bailiff and the reeve. Your wife sits a step away before a small bench, her head bowed and face pale. You feel the weight of each parishioner's stare. Deacon Simon calls for silence and invites you to present your complaint. You recount the servant's testimony and the blacksmith's confession. You conclude, "My lord, I seek redress under church law. I ask that this marriage be dissolved, or that my wife face penance and fate determined by your tribunal." Deacon Simon motions to your wife. He speaks kindly. "Lady Isabel, do you deny or confess these charges?" She lifts her veil and meets his gaze. She speaks in a steady voice. "I do not deny that I sought the company of another man. My heart felt heavy, and I sought comfort. I confess my sin before God and before this court." The word sin rings through the chapel. You stand with clenched fists, but remain silent. The vicar instructs Deacon Simon to call witnesses. The steward steps forward. He recounts seeing your wife leave at dusk with a man cloaked in grey. He describes their course toward the blacksmith's barn and back before midnight. Next, the reeve testifies that he found broken straw and footprints in the barn. Finally, the blacksmith, his tunic stained with ash, speaks of how your wife spent hours there speaking softly to him. As each witness speaks, you notice your wife's gaze fixed on the stone floor. Deacon Simon rises and addresses your wife. "You have heard these testimonies. Do you stand by your confession?" She nods, tears welling in her eyes. She does not speak further. The deacon then turns to you. "Lord Geoffrey, do you seek annulment or pardon? You consider the weight of marriage and your honor. In medieval custom pardoning, adultery often demands penance and public humiliation. Annulment dissolves the marriage as if it never existed, but only under specific grounds such as consanguinity or lack of consummation. Adultery alone does not usually provide grounds for annulment. You recall that no mobile tower of kinship prevents your union. Your bride was of appropriate lineage, and you consummated the marriage. Thus, annulment would require proving trickery or false promises at the wedding. Instead, you decide to pursue a divorce by mutual consent, a rare remedy permitted if the wife atones publicly and secures dispensation. You say, "I seek a divorce, to separate with my fidelity intact." The deacon shakes his head. Divorce lies only where sin runs deeper or consent fails. You may petition the bishop directly for a papal dispensation. He continues, "The church holds marriage as a sacrament. Separation remains possible, but divorce and subsequent remarriage require dispensation that few receive." Your heart sinks. You realize you cannot remarry unless you obtain rare permission. Without papal dispensation, your ex-wife will remain wed in the church's eyes, and you would be forever barred from taking a new wife. Deacon Simon then turns to your wife. "Lady Isabel, you must perform public penance to seek mercy. You will stand barefoot in the village market at midday for 3 days, reciting prayers and wearing a coarse hair shirt. You will beg forgiveness from the community and your husband. Only then may you seek reinstatement of rights to your dower lands. Should you refuse, you forfeit any claim to property and face excommunication." Your wife bows her head. You see tears glisten on her cheeks. She announces in a soft voice, "I accept this penance." A murmur passes through the congregation. You feel sorrow mixed with anger. The deacon pronounces sentence. "Then be it known that Lady Isabel will stand in the market square at midday, barefoot and clad in hair shirt. She will speak these words thrice. 'I have sinned against my marriage vows and against my Lord. May God have mercy and grant me penance.' At the sound of the church bell, she will kneel and pray before the people. This shall occur for 3 days. Your wife rises and follows the deacon out of the chapel. You remain standing as the vicar pronounces blessings over the congregation. His words echo, 'Remember charity and truth.' That afternoon, in the manor's solar, you call your steward and reeve. You instruct them to prepare notice in each cottage. Attend the market square at the third bell tomorrow for Lady Isabel's penance. Offer no violence or malice. You then consider your options. As her husband, you have right to claim her dower lands. She may lose those rights if penance fails. You resolve to protect your daughter's interests above all. The next morning you visit your daughter's tutor to ensure she sees the penance. You take her small hand and lead her to the market square. A wooden platform stands at center. Your wife kneels on rough planks, wearing a plain hair shirt and offering a prayer. You watch as she recites her scripted words. Onlookers stare in quiet pity. Merchants and farmers stand behind her, their eyes solemn. You glance around at faces you know. Some nod in silent sympathy. Others avert their eyes, suspicious of scandal. You feel shame for your wife, but also gratitude that she performs penance rather than flee. After the third day of penance concludes, you return to the chapel. The vicar meets you at the door and gives you a small sealed scroll. He explains that your wife's repentance pleases the bishop. The scroll grants limited reinstatement of her rights to dower lands, but not to remarry. You take the scroll and bow your head. You know that she may stay as joint household mistress, but may not claim full authority over those lands. As weeks pass, you see your wife resume duties in the household. She serves at the high table, her face drawn but determined. Tenants approach her for rent reductions, as she once granted them. You hold firm that only half may be forgiven. She honors your decision, which helps restore her reputation. Over the next year, you face a new petition. A neighboring widow seeks an annulment from her second husband. She claims that the groom hid a previous marriage and now demands release. The church tribunal assembles. Evidence shows that he married first a peasant girl and had children. Then he wed a wealthy widow without revealing his earlier union. That second marriage is void by canonical law due to bigamy. The tribunal annuls his second marriage and returns the widow's property. She regains lands she brought to the union. Her first husband's heirs inherit little. You watch with interest, knowing that marriage in medieval times, though sacred, remains subject to rules. Deception and infidelity can alter lineage and property drastically. 1 year after your wife's penance, the bishop's vicar delivers a letter to your manor. It states that your daughter, now 9 years old, must bear witness to any future annulment you seek. A minor's dower claim may require demonstration of non-consummation. You resolve never to take a new bride, fearing such complexities for your daughter. In your private chapel, you kneel and pray for guidance. You read from the Book of Canon Law, noting that adultery carries fines and corporal punishment. A first offender may be exiled for a season. A second offense risks mutilation, cutting away the hand used to bear temptation. These punishments avert dishonor, yet in practice a husband may spare his wife if he chooses. You recall your own forbearance and your wife's sincere remorse. You reflect that divorce remains rare. Only when the marriage broke under duress, impotence, or consanguinity could courts grant separation. You remember that your wife's uncle once sought annulment on grounds that his first wife descended from his own aunt. The tribunal granted annulment because their kinship existed within prohibited degrees. Today, you oversee a new dispute. A neighbor's wife claims her husband beat her for failing to bear children. She offers no proof of infidelity but asks for a divorce by cruelty. The tribunal convenes and hears testimony. The husband admits he struck her once. The priest declares that violence contradicts the sacrament's vow of love. The tribunal grants separation, but not divorce. She may leave his home, and he must provide monthly support. Neither may remarry. You note that separation by cruelty differs from divorce by mutual consent. As dusk falls, you sit beside the hearth and ponder these customs. The laws ensure order, but also complicate hearts. In medieval life, marriage binds beyond the grave, property shifts upon sin, and forgiveness requires public penance. You recall your wife's hair shirt and the day you walked her to the chapel. You remember the tears in her eyes and the hush that fell over the congregation. These moments define honor and forgiveness in a harsh world. In the silence, you vow to continue protecting your daughter's inheritance and teaching her these lessons before she weds. For now, you tend the hearth's embers and recite a prayer. Grant that fidelity hold firm, that mercy temper justice, and that love endure beyond scandal. You dip your head as you stoke the fire and feel resolve settle within you. In medieval times, these customs shape lives more deeply than any vow whispered before an altar. You rise and leave the hearth's glow to walk the courtyard, mindful that tomorrow's dawn may bring new trials and new chances for grace. You awake at dawn in early spring to the scent of damp earth and roosters crowing. Together, you and your husband walk to the fields, where ploughmen wait with yokes of oxen. He guides the team while you scatter seed into furrows. As the sun warms your shoulders, you recall last winter's careful mending of tools. Now each turn of the plough prepares life for the months ahead. By late spring, wildflowers bloom along the hedgerows. You rise before sunrise to gather fresh eggs from the henhouse and bring them to your husband at the barn. He breaks each egg into a wooden bowl while sheep graze nearby. After breakfast of porridge and herbs, you fetch pails from the well to water young crops of barley and peas. You prune the vines on the trellis, knowing that summer's warmth will ripen grapes for wine. Summer's heat finds you weaving baskets from willow to hold ripe fruit. Your husband checks beehives for honey, taking care not to anger the swarm. At midday, you gather under the shade of an old oak to rest and share a simple meal of bread, cheese, and thick ale. Afterwards, you return to the field she to repair a broken fence, and you to gather wild herbs for salves that soothe sunburn and insect stings. As harvest approaches in late summer, your days grow long. You rise before dawn to join neighbors in cutting sheaves of wheat with sickles. You tie bundles and stack them into stooks. Your husband leads oxen to pull wagons loaded with grain to the granary. At dusk, you share a bowl of meat stew and crusty bread beside a crackling fire. Autumn's chill brings festivals. At Michaelmas, you and your husband join neighbors in the churchyard to give thanks for the bounty. You wear your finest gown, and he dons a tunic trimmed with wool. You process around fields with torches, blessing each furrow with salt and wine. After Vespers, the community gathers in the great hall to toast roast goose, apples, and spiced mead. When winter's frost arrives, you spend mornings tending the hearth. You knead bread dough by the fire and kindle coal embers to warm the room. Your husband chops firewood and repairs thatch on a lean-to shed. You mend woolen cloaks and wind yarn by lamplight. In the afternoon, you both gather around the table to shell nuts and weave straw into baskets. Before supper, you ensure the horses' blankets are secure and the cattle sheltered in the barn. As the days shorten, you and your husband sit by candlelight to plan the coming year. You review seed supplies and discuss what to plant. He sharpens scythes for the next harvest. You speak of the chapel's Lent fasts and vow to fast together before Easter. Though the cold outside bites through the walls, you feel warmth in shared labor, in whispered prayers, and in the simple rhythm of seasonal life as a married couple. When a child is born, you wake before dawn to tend the hearth and prepare a bowl of thin porridge before sunrise. Your newborn lies swaddled on a straw pallet near the hearth, and you hold her small hand while recounting prayers to Saint Anne. In medieval custom, the first duty is baptism. You dress in a simple tunic and carry the child to the chapel, where the priest stands beside a stone font filled with water. You kneel and lay your infant on your arms. The priest dips 2 fingers into the cool water and makes the sign of the cross on her forehead. He names her Mary and prays for guardianship under God. You feel relief, knowing her soul now belongs to both family and faith. After baptism, you return home to nurture the child's health. You nurse her at your breast, watching the firelight dance across the chamber walls. You whisper blessings as she sucks milk, and you think of heirs and inheritance. In medieval custom, a male heir secures the family line, but daughters matter for alliances. You and your husband speak of marrying your daughter to a neighbor's son to strengthen ties and ensure peace between estates. As she grows, you teach her to spin wool and recite psalms. Your husband arranges for her to learn reading in the chapel school. When she reaches the age of 7, he visits the neighboring lord to propose a future match. They exchange gifts, a packet of fine cloth from your side, and a cask of salted pork from the other. Each gift signals mutual trust and promise. You watch the tenant families share news of the match and nod with approval. Years pass, and your daughter blossoms into a young woman skilled in weaving and house management. You and your husband prepare a dowry, bolts of cloth, a small herd of sheep, and a parcel of land by the river. When the betrothal ceremony occurs, she kneels before the priest and exchanges vows with her future husband. You place a small bag of silver in her hand. From that moment, the child you once held as infant becomes part of a wider network of alliances, ensuring your family's security and honor. As dawn breaks, you rise from a straw mattress perched atop rough floorboards. Your body aches from yesterday's labor, fetching water, tending livestock, and mending a torn cloak. You slip into a simple woolen shift and knot a worn leather belt around your waist. In medieval custom, marriage merges two worlds of constant toil and strict order. You head to the barn where goats bleat and a cow lowing signals milking time. Without modern tools, every task demands muscle and skill. You kneel beside the cow, guiding her udder beneath a wooden pail. Fingers stiffen in cold before you fill the pail with warm milk. You spring to your feet and carry it back to the hearth. At the hearth, you stoke embers to heat a pot for ashen porridge. You stir grain and water until its texture resembles thin gruel. You pour a bowl for your husband, who stands outside reviewing harvest plans. He sips and nods approval, ready to ride to the fields once he finishes his portion. You step outside into the mist to light torches along the pathway. Shepherds wait in the meadow to guide sheep to new pasture. You grab a bundle of reeds and weave them into a makeshift barrier to mend a broken fence. Each reed snaps beneath your hands until you shape a barrier strong enough to hold livestock. You tie woven reeds to wooden stakes with strips of leather, remembering that every small repair prevents disaster. By midday, you attend to linen cloaks damp from yesterday's rain. You spread them across rocks near the stream and beat them with wooden paddles to wash away mud. Your hands sting from cold water, yet you scrub vigorously until each cloak dries in midday sun. You wring out heavy fabric and drape it over a low fence. In the afternoon, you lead your children to the edge of a coppice wood to gather firewood. You heft a heavy bundle on your back, waddling through brambles to return to the cottage. You split logs at the hearth with an axe worn nearly blunt. You reforge its edge by sharpening it against a whetstone. As dusk falls, you fetch water once more for evening chores. You bring pails from the well while wind stirs the thatch overhead. Inside the cottage, you knead dough for tomorrow's bread, then boil broth stirred with root vegetables. You nurse a fire for warmth and watch shadows flicker across stone walls. Before bed, you join your husband in the solar to discuss the next day's tasks. You speak of repairing worn wheels on the cart and supervising flax processing. You recite a prayer for the Virgin Mother to grant strength and patience. You climb onto a pallet of straw and linen. Outside, the moon glows through shutters, and you drift to sleep, knowing the dawn will bring the same unending labor. In medieval marriage, there is no rest, only duty. If you believe you could endure a single day of this life, remember that every sunrise carries new burdens, and that every task demands strength beyond measure.